All right. Hi, I'm Gina. I'm an addict. Yeah, it feels really good to sit here and share today. I say that because when I first came to Narcotics Anonymous, this was pretty much like the last place that I wanted to be. I knew when I first came to NA at 19 years old that that I probably had a drug problem, but I didn't think that there was any place where I could find help, and I was pretty sure that everyone in NA, they didn't really have anything to offer for me at 19 years old, and I was pretty sure at 19 that I would die as a using addict. I would die, or I would accidentally kill someone else, or kill myself, and I was pretty certain that that would be what my life would be. But now I'm, 27 years old, and I didn't get clean at 19. I got clean shortly before my 21st birthday, but I have 6 years and some months clean, and yeah, I'm not dead today, and I'm happy to be a member of Narcotics Anonymous, which is something that I couldn't have imagined myself saying when I got here. For me, I came from a family of using addicts. They made their addiction look not too bad to me. They mostly used alcohol as their drug, my family. Most of them are still using, and they hold down jobs and they have families that they're not really present for, but they take their kids to most of their sporting events, and they just have a few DUIs here and there and a few arrests here and there. But pretty much they make it look like it's okay to continue using for the rest of your life, And so from a very young age, I knew that when I got old enough, I was going to use drugs. That was just a given. I had no thought that these people using and the consequences they face is not attractive to me. I just knew that as soon as I was old enough that I would be able to use with my family, and that I would finally feel comfortable, and I would finally feel like I belonged somewhere. And so when I started using at the age of 10, it was just really natural for me. It didn't even seem like a big deal. I don't even remember making some big decision. It just was this is just what everybody that I know around me does, and this is what I'll do now. And I used even knowing that my grandfather had died of his addiction. My father had died of his addiction, and I had seen him die of it, and I used anyway. And I can't say that I believe that it's anyone's fault that I'm an addict. I think that this is just... I think I was just born this way, and that this is just, who I am. And for a long time, that question of why was super important to me. But what I do know is that, even before I picked up drugs, I needed something to change the way that I felt. I knew that in the world I didn't feel okay. I didn't feel enough. Life just felt really painful to me at a very young age, and I needed something outside of myself to make me feel better. So when I found drugs, I found that thing. I felt better. I could use and go to school and not care that anybody made fun of me. I could use and be home and be abused and not care that anyone was abusing me. And I felt like when I finally picked up drugs that I had found my solution to life, and I continued to use for another 10 years. And in that 10 years, what I can say is that my addiction, it progressed. I mean, it really progressed. It went from using a few times a week to having to use to get out of bed in the morning, and having to use to walk outside the house, and having to use to go to sleep. And that's where it went for me. And when I got clean, I was, the first time I went to an NA meeting, I was, 19 years old, and I thought that, I'm too young to be an addict. I haven't had X consequences or whatever. And what I know now is that, if I look at my using history, those are consequences that I have yet to have, that if I pick up again, I can have if I want them, and that I feel lucky that Narcotics Anonymous has helped me arrest the disease of addiction today. And, at 19 years old, basically what had happened is I had a really gnarly drug overdose and ended up in the hospital, and I knew that something wasn't right. I knew that the people around me who were using weren't overdosing on drugs, and I knew that I was using different than they were, and I didn't know why. And I just knew that there was something wrong with me, and I thought that I was depressed. I thought that I had a mental illness, and so I went to a psychiatrist who I thought would give me some good drugs to fix me. And so I go to this psychiatrist, and I tell him about my using, and I tell him about my depression, and I tell him about my life, and you know, he was basically like, I don't know what the hell's wrong with you, but I do think that you have a drug problem, and the rest of it I can't sort out until you stop using drugs. And I remember just feeling like totally floored, like, what are you talking about? I have a drug problem. Like, I had just given him a history of having to use to get out of bed in the morning, but I just couldn't see that I had a problem. And for whatever reason, you know, he was like, well, I'm not going to give you any pills today, but I am going to recommend that you go to this, you know, outpatient rehab. And I listened to him, and I went to this rehab, and I wasn't willing to take any of the suggestions. I thought that the things that they had to offer me just didn't apply to me. I felt like I didn't fit there, and I felt like I wasn't an addict, or I wasn't an addict like these people in rehab were addicts. And so I continued to go to the program, and I continued to get high. And the way that I chose to get high is I chose to leave some drugs behind and pick up drugs that were more socially acceptable. So I used alcohol, I used weed, things that other people use in my life. And you know, what I found is that no matter what drug I pick up, like, my addiction follows me, and that I'm incapable of using and managing my use. Once I pick up a drug, that's it, and I don't get to choose the consequences that I have. And you know, eventually I dropped out of that rehab because they, you know, they gave me an option, like, either you can stop, you know, drinking and smoking weed, or if you don't, like, you have to leave here, you know, and I chose to leave because drinking and getting high, you know, that was more important to me than my recovery. And luckily there was a member in that rehab that I became friends with, and I saw his life start to change. He, you know, he got his kids back, he got his family back, he got off probation, and he just, like, had this, like, light, and I didn't know what was different with him, but you know, after I left rehab, he was like, hey, like, you know, I want to say goodbye to you, because at this point I was like, you know, the problem is this rehab, the problem is this town, like, I'm going to leave, I'm going to move. And before I moved, I wanted to say goodbye to this friend of mine, and so he said, sure, we can say goodbye, but I'm going to a Narcotics Anonymous meeting tonight, so you'll have to come with me there, because that's what I'm doing. And you know, he drove like an hour and a half to pick my, you know, sorry ass up, and he took me to this Narcotics Anonymous meeting. And I remember sitting there and thinking, like, God, what the fuck am I doing here, you know? And they asked at the beginning if there were any newcomers, and I was like, yeah, I'd be a newcomer if I was an addict. And he grabbed my arm and raised my hand for me, and I had like 20-something members come over and give me a hug, and oh, I hated it. I really hated it, and it was fucking awful, and I felt like, God, what am I doing here? But what I did see at that meeting was I saw for the first time people who really loved and cared about each other in a way that I didn't see when I was using, because none of my using buddies gave a fuck about me if I wasn't using drugs, if I didn't have something for them, money, drugs, a place to sleep, you know. And what I saw is, like, members of Narcotics Anonymous seemed to genuinely be involved in each other's lives. And at that meeting, you know, two major things happened. One, I saw that the disease of addiction was a serious thing. The meeting was grieving the loss of a member who had 11 years clean, and who had, you know, stopped going to meetings, and who's gotten busy with life, and who went back to using heroin, and he overdosed and died. And what I found at that meeting was that what people do in Narcotics Anonymous is serious. People are here in Narcotics Anonymous, like, we're here to save our lives and to save other people's lives, and that the disease of addiction is a serious thing. And the second thing I got from that meeting was a basic text of Narcotics Anonymous, and I didn't open it for months, but I carried it with me, you know, all around the country with my use, and it was like this, like, little light that I had in my backpack, and it was, you know, it was there for me. And yeah, and I left that meeting saying, you know, well, if I ever decide I really have a problem with drugs, at least there's a place for me to go. And you know, and I did some geographics, and eventually what I found is that I took my addiction right with me, and eventually I ended up in San Francisco, where I thought I could move to get away from the drugs I was using elsewhere. And what I found is my addiction had followed me there, and that using wasn't fun anymore, and that I was using against my will, and that I would say, God, I have to go to work today. Like, I have to go to work because I have to pay rent, and I don't want to do the other things I can do to pay rent, and I need to go to work. But I had to get high first. And I knew if I got high that I wasn't going to go to work. And I knew that there was going to be consequences, and I had to get high anyway. And that was just devastating. And I just like, you know, I just was in a place of like complete demoralization. And so eventually I went to a Narcotics Anonymous meeting because I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know what to do. I was sick of living the way that I was living, and I went to NA, and people in NA, they welcomed me, and I wasn't really ready to get clean. I thought I could use NA kind of like my own type of harm reduction program, in that I go to meetings, I get 30 days. I thought I could always go out and party for a few days and come back and get 30 days, and I'd have some consequences, but that they wouldn't be so bad. And what I found is that every time I picked up, I couldn't control my consequences. Every time I picked up, I was at risk of getting locked up. I was putting myself in the way of other people's violence. I was waking up, sleeping on doorsteps in San Francisco, not knowing how I had gotten there, and that I wasn't able to choose the consequences I was having for my use anymore. And so eventually I had a 5-day relapse after getting 6 months of clean time, and that relapse brought me to my knees. And that relapse, I had this feeling of like, God, like, just from the moment I picked up a drug of like, oh my God, like I had so many choices and I gave them all away, and the only choice now I have is to use, and I'm never going to be able to stop, and I'm going to die using, or I'm going to get locked up or be in an institution. And I did. I ended up in an institution for a few days, and that institution, even though I didn't want to be there in that mental hospital, it saved my life. When I got there, I said, I'm a drug addict and I have the disease of addiction, and I need you to keep me here until the drugs come out of my body, and I need you to let me go because I need to go to Narcotics Anonymous, because those are the people that can help me. And that's what I did, and I haven't used since. And that was November 29th, 2011, and that was the last day that I used, and I've been here ever since. And Narcotics Anonymous has been here for me whenever I've needed it. And it's funny, like a lot of life stuff happens. I mean, just because we get clean doesn't mean that life doesn't happen and difficult things don't happen. But the one thing that hasn't changed, my life has radically changed in the past 6 years, but one thing that hasn't changed is that I'm clean today, that I'm a member of Narcotics Anonymous today. And so no matter what's going on in my life, I feel like I have this like anchor that keeps me feeling okay in the world, and I haven't had to get loaded over anything. I won't say that like recovery is like we suddenly get clean and we have no other issues. When I came in here, I was homeless when I finally got clean. I struggled with homelessness. I've struggled with that off and on in recovery. I've had medical issues. I've been in and out of hospitals for chronic medical, physical medical conditions, and that's been difficult. I've had breakups and deaths, and those things have happened, and I haven't had to get loaded no matter what. And the way that I've done that is, the first thing that I do is I go to a meeting. I mean, meetings are a really big part of my life. For the first year and a half of my recovery, I went to 2 to 3 meetings a day, and for the first few years after that, I went to about 2 meetings a day, 1 to 2 meetings a day, and now I pretty much, I go to like 4 to 5 meetings a week, something like that, and that's what I need to do to stay sane, and meetings have been a big part of my recovery, because when I go to a meeting and I'm feeling like alone and I'm feeling isolated in the world and I'm feeling like I have no other options other than to get high, I go to a meeting with a bunch of people who are doing something else other than getting high, and they let me know that, I can do that too. And, I'm a part of the Fellowship of Narcotics Anonymous. I have what we call service commitments, where, I show up and I help out at Narcotics Anonymous, and I always have had a service commitment all throughout my recovery, because even when I go to a meeting, if I have to go and, open the doors for other people to have a meeting, I'm more likely to show up. I have a sponsor, and I work the steps, and the 12 steps of Narcotics Anonymous, our program, tells us that we can lose the desire to use, and that we never have to use again, and that we can find a new way of life. And for me, the steps are about finding a new way of life. I can go to meetings and just be kind of dry off of drugs, but my old behavior is still there, because I'm not treating the disease of addiction. I'm just putting down the drugs. And working the 12 Steps Narcotics Anonymous has radically changed my life and the person that I am today. And I didn't see that at first when I worked the steps. I worked them angrily and begrudgingly. And with a lot of resentment. I came in with a resentment against God and people who believed in God, and I was like, well, fine, I'll work your steps anyway, even though I don't believe in God, and I'll do them my way. And you know what? If that's what gets you to work the steps, and that's what gets you to work the steps, and that worked for my first round, is that feeling of like, I don't believe in God, and I'll work them anyway. And I did. I worked all 12 steps in Narcotics Anonymous, and I'm on my second round of steps, and it's just pretty amazing. When I came into Narcotics Anonymous, I was a broken and empty person. I had no idea. If you were to ask me, like, what's your favorite color? What do you like? What morals and values are important to you? Like, I couldn't give you an answer to any of those things. The only thing that I knew with my life is that I like to use drugs, and I like to use a lot of drugs often. And I didn't really have much else to tell you about myself, And through working the steps, I've gotten to know myself in the way that I am in the world, for better and for worse. And I've gotten to improve my relationships with myself and others through working the steps. And I won't say that like I got clean and I never wanted to use drugs again. If anyone's listening to this and you're like, clean and you're thinking like, God, like I want to use, like there's something wrong with me, and I'm here to tell you that there's nothing wrong with you. Like, we're drug addicts and we want to use drugs. We want to find some way to change the way that we feel, and that's the most natural thing for an addict to do in the world. And I'm also here to say that we never have to use again, no matter what. We don't have to do that one day at a time. And because of the program, I have tools in recovery that allow me to make different choices. I can want to use drugs and I don't have to pick up. And some of those tools are, going to a meeting, calling another person in recovery. One thing I've always done is if I feel like using or making a big decision that I'm afraid will negatively impact my life, that I call and talk to 3 people on the phone prior to making that decision. Another thing that I do is say, well, I want to use today, or hurt myself or someone else, and I say, you know what, that seems like a big decision. How about I just go to bed and I can make it again tomorrow, And by doing that one day at a time, like I have 6 years clean, and I feel really proud to be a member of Narcotics Anonymous today. It's allowed me to be in the world. When I got clean, like I definitely was like a wrecking ball through people's lives, but in another way I also was just absent, I was either in your life and I was causing havoc, or I was too much to have in your life and I just wasn't there. And I missed weddings and I missed funerals and I missed baptisms, and I missed all of these things in people's lives because getting loaded was just simply more important, and all of the activities that go around getting loaded were more important, and I was absent. And I can say today that I'm not absent in people's lives today. I have a family and I talk to them and they talk to me, and they look forward to calling me, and they call me for advice today, which is something that when I got clean, nobody was calling me to ask me any sort of advice for anything, And, I have friends and they rely on me today. And, Narcotics Anonymous has allowed me to be in the world in a way that I couldn't have imagined. So yeah, I don't know, I'm really happy to be here. Narcotics Anonymous has changed my life, and if you're at the point that I was at, I would say give it a try, and the point that I was at was that, I either wanted to kill myself or die, or I wanted to get clean because the pain of living the way that I was living was too much. And I didn't know if I wanted to die without giving recovery a chance, And so I made a commitment in Narcotics Anonymous to at least give the program a chance to work in my life. And, if I decided it didn't work, I could always go back to using later. And what I found is that Narcotics Anonymous has worked for me a day at a time, and, often against, sometimes like I don't always want a solution. I just like want to be miserable and believe that like no one or nothing can help me. And what I found is that Narcotics Anonymous has always helped me, despite my desire to be miserable at times. And that if I stay here, that my life continues to wildly exceed my expectations. So yeah, I'm happy to be here, and I hope that I hope that that no addict needs to die of the disease of addiction today. And if you think that you might be an addict, this might be a good place to come. So thank you.